Tulsa. I've got 3 good reasons, not just 1 or 2. I've got 3 good reasons for leaving Tulsa. That's July, August, and you.
When it comes to how I got started in this business, is I grew up in it. I grew up in it without really knowing it. I lived out in a rural area off a road called Coyote Trail, and I had a fairly quiet upbringing. Only child. We had cows and horses and all that stuff, so I grew up doing that and riding a tractor. I am a tractor boy, right? And I recall those days of always hearing radio, because my mother was very much a music fan. So I started hearing it about 6 o'clock in the morning every day. So it was ingrained. Also in those days, it was more of a neighborhood atmosphere, like we've lost these days. And on most Saturday nights, there'd be a gathering for card playing, and my mom and aunts would bake cookies. It was quite a deal. But I remember hearing in the background them talking about Bob Wills. It was always a conversation about Bob Wills' Texas Playboys. So I heard that, and I'd heard about Cain's Ballroom and how it was the best place to hear music, and Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys were a religion then. So I had it ingrained, and this would probably be late 50s, early 60s. So I had it in there. And consequently, in the mid-50s, if you were from the rural areas, you usually came to Tulsa to do your shopping, maybe once a month, which we did. In fact, there was an old streetcar that went down the middle of Charles Page Boulevard in Sand Springs that we rode on. On one of those Saturdays, my parents and I were walking up Denver Avenue, where there was a Sears and Roebuck and a Crest, and it's just the old hometown stores that you shop at. At about 3rd or 4th in Denver, where the city bus station is, was the beautiful Cimarron Ballroom. It was a palace. It really was a palace. I was in it several times. But off in the distance, I saw this tall guy walk out the alley at maybe noonish, and he had rhinestones all over his jacket and down the stripes of his pants. It was Leon McAuliffe. In fact, when the sun hit those rhinestones, it looked like a laser show. And that set the hook. Mom, who is that? Well, that's Leon McAuliffe. Take it away, Leon. That's my first impression of starting to get the fever, okay? So I began taking steel guitar lessons in 1958 with a grand old teacher named Dick Gordon Sr. And Dick's influence on this town is massive, because he taught so many hundreds of boys and girls how to play guitar, how to sing, how to get more sophisticated chord changes. And his influence affected a lot of people that just bled down, just bled down to a massive amount of parents and uncles and aunts. And by 1960, around 1960, I heard Walk, Don't Run by the Ventures. So I had to put my guitar down and pick up my mom's old 1958 Gibson sitting over there and learn how to play Walk, Don't Run. Then all of a sudden, here comes the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys, wonderful. So I was hooked on that. And I thought all music had to come from the West Coast. This is all coming from the edge of the Pacific Ocean out to California. And then all of a sudden, February 1964, on a Sunday night, Ed Sullivan, hundreds of thousands, millions of us saw the Beatles. And I would have been about 16 years old. It was just the right time, because I'd got fairly accomplished on the guitar, and I had a local band called the Undertakers. I was the guitarist. And the way we formed that band was in the cafeteria the Monday after we saw the Beatles the night before. And it was a bunch of old just slobs like me, You know, we were just huddled. You know, Larry, you can play the guitar. I could get my uncle's drum kit, and like I'd say, thousands of bands were actually formed the day after they saw the Beatles. After we saw the Beatles, so that got me deeper into loving the music and the guitars. You know, electric guitar can run your life. It can run your life, by the way. I'll put that warning up. But it didn't run mine. It got me wherever I am right here today. So I go through college, graduate from University of Tulsa, and I dreaded the reality of having to go straight. Am I going to work selling life insurance? What dull-ass job am I going to get stuck with? I couldn't shake it. Even through, my mother handed me my old notebook, one of my notebooks from the University of Tulsa. And over in the pages was some pretty dull stuff, okay? But in the margin, I had drawn pictures of women's asses, tits, guitars, amplifiers, raging airplane battles. I know you can't put all this in Tulsa people, but I'm going to put the sauce on it when it needs to be. So I just couldn't face the reality of stopping. Because during the 60s, when I was in college and high school, starting in 1964, we were almost booked every weekend. And the guys in my band happened to be guys that really didn't have much. You know, we didn't have money. But all of a sudden, after we got started playing, we'd come in on a Monday, we'd have $50, $75. And that was a lot of money back in 1965. So it changed everything. You know, all of a sudden we're driving Thunderbirds and Fords and real good-looking shirts. And a higher class of women, okay? So that made it even more intriguing. But I happened to be out on the road with a band called Gypsy Fat. And during that summer, we played up through Illinois, Missouri, back down through Kansas, Texas. We happened to be in Bollinger, Texas, and the place was so rough, it was all those redneck, those old oil well guys, you know, the roughnecks, and they were. There was 2 or 3 fist fights going on all the time. So bad that they'd come up, it would bleed over to us and knock our microphones over. And I said, we ain't playing the bar tonight. We're going to pack our stuff and sneak out of here. Well, it just so happened Jimi Hendrix was playing at the Tulsa Assembly Center that June 1970. So I got more twisted. Out of all that experience, I was drafted into the Army the day after I left TU. I got out of the Army in 1971 and literally had no direction except drinking booze, far behind, dropping a little acid here and there. Good lifestyle. I worked on a hay hauling crew up in Pawnee County, and I'd make $30 on a big day, 20 on a bad day. It wasn't a bad lifestyle. But I get a phone call, June or July of 1971, from a guy named Gene Crownover, who happened to be the house band for an old lady named Marie Myers, who owned Cain's Ballroom at the time. She probably in her late 80s. She was very sentimental about Cain's, and in her mind, she just wanted to relive those glory days of Bob Wills. And Tulsa had moved south by then. And Cain's obviously was kind of on the wrong side of the tracks. And she was failing miserably. She didn't know how to market or advertise. And 20 or 30 people would show up on a Saturday night, so it was not a good deal for her. But anyway, Gene Crownover had the house band that played there. Gene Crownover and the Western Airs. I get a phone call out at my parents' house looking for me, and it's actually Gene Crownover who wants me to come in and audition on a steel guitar because he'd heard somewhere that I could play fairly well, and which was questionable. So I tried to talk him out of it. I said, listen, I appreciate you calling, but man, I haven't touched that steel guitar in 10 years or more. Oh no, I heard you could play. Come on, I want you to audition this afternoon. So I finally said, okay, I'll come over, but I'm not good enough to play with you pro guys that play all the professional guys. But I'll come over just because you asked me. And when I went down to the Cain's, it would be the first time I ever walked in it on that Saturday afternoon. And when I went through those double doors into the ballroom, it affected me immediately. Like, what the hell has happened here? You could just tell. It was just, it gave me a little chill up the back of my neck, you know? And of course I got up and I played half of one song with Crown Over, and he stopped me and said, "You're right, you're not good enough to play." But of course I had no idea I would buy the building 5 years later. My company's Little Wing Concerts, Little Wing Productions. It's 53 years old at this moment, 2024. And walking through the hayfield, now, when Jimmy passed, it really affected me because I'd just gotten into him so much. And I grieved over it. So walking through the hayfield, trying to manage a way to figure out how to get in a business with no money, I said, I got to pay homage to Jimi Hendrix and name my company. So that's where I came up with the name Little Wing to honor Jimi Hendrix. And their Little Wing is born. That's 1971. It goes back a ways. So to be a promoter, you have to do a show, don't you? I worked out of a little barber shop up in Prattville, Oklahoma. 6-seater. Had a payphone outside on the sidewalk. I had the last seat in the line of barber chairs and a shower curtain hanging between number 5 and 6 chair. And I would rack my brain, I had no idea what things cost, by the way. I said, how can I come up with a major show? And and I had to use payphone, remember? So I had to get a pocket full of quarters and dimes and nickels. And I'd call agent after agent, New York and LA, and not get a call back. Would he pick up my call? You know, or put me on hold worse, because then I'm about to run out of quarters. Just keep plugging. That payphone's still there, by the way. But I finally got an agent in New York to talk to me, and I told him what I wanted to do, and I'd had no experience, even though I fudged and told him I had all kinds of experience. He finally said, I got an act that I can give you. I'll sell you an act on Black Oak, Arkansas. I'd already heard of him. It wasn't exactly my favorite act, but it was someone finally offered me to buy a show. So I made the deal to buy that date for the Brady Theater, which was called Tulsa Municipal Theater then. It happened, it was the October date, and I recall printing up many posters and walking the midway of the fair, all hours of the fair. Because in those days, you could pretty much spot who was a music person. They smelled like patchouli oil, they wore leather fringe jackets, they had long hair, close enough. So I did a lot doing that to sell the show. While I was doing that, I was parking cars for $48 a week downtown Tulsa, B&B Auto Ramp, about Boston and 6th and Boston. I was parking cars. And the show sold well. And it kept selling. But I didn't quite trust my position in the music business. So I parked cars up until noon the day of show. Day of show, my Black Oak show, I was still parking cars at 11:30 a.m. But at noon, I said, I quit. And I changed into a new shirt and a new pair of jeans, and I hustled over to the Brady Theater. That show happened to sell out clean. And to get enough money to do it, I had a 1950 Harley Davidson, and I had an old 65 Volkswagen. Those were my possessions. And I talked to the bank into loaning me about $3,500 with those as collateral, and that's how I paid for my first show. It sold out of me about $5,000. That's a lot of money compared to the $48 a week I was making that morning. And I said, I'm on to something. I'm on to something. So my father worked at American Airlines at that time, and I could fly free anywhere on standby. So this is about 3 or 4 days after the Black Oak show. I come up with the idea, and I'm a rock and roller, by the way. I'm a Jimi Hendrix fan. You already know that. I've told you. I said, I got to bring Merle Haggard in. Where I got the idea, and I'm not sure, but I knew Merle was kind of an outlaw. He'd played Tulsa and been a little bit drunk, and the crowd kind of turned on him, so he kind of ruined this market. So I called Bakersfield, where the office was, for Merle, and the manager wouldn't even pick up a call. And I'd call again, wouldn't pick up my call. Finally, I called, the receptionist says, "Oh, Mr. Shaeffer, don't you know they're in Nashville for the DJ convention?" He and his manager, Fuzzy Owens. And I got my flight pass, my polyester jacket and tie, because you had to wear that to get your free passes on American. So I fly to Nashville immediately, get a taxi cab up to the King of the Road Hotel. In those days, they were pretty lax. I go to the counter and I say, "I'm here to see Merle Haggard." "Well, he's in room 1213, you know. I'm up there. Knock, 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 knock. So Merle and Fuzzy come to the door, you know, a little bit too early for them. And Fuzzy, who's the manager, ex-steel guitar player for Merle, said, "Well, who are you?" Okay. So I gave him my pitch. Said, "Listen, it'll take me 30 minutes, but go down in the lobby, sit down, get your cup of coffee, and I'll come down and talk to you about it." So here he come, and I talked it up pretty big, and I ended up getting that date in that cup of coffee. So, and we didn't make formal contracts. I went up to the counter at the hotel and I asked for a couple pieces of stationery, and we wrote out the deal. Larry Shaeffer, Little Wing, agrees to pay Merle Haggard $10,000 on X date. That's how I got the date. And it sold out. I made about $30,000. Now that's a lot of money back then. And I knew I was onto something. I mean, it just came to me. And so that's how I really got it going. Now, I've run out of money and been near bankruptcy many times since then. I tell people my whole 53 years of this business, I've been 1 foot ahead of the wolf chasing me. And it's still that way, but I can't, maybe I like it that way. I was never really into how rich I could get. I just had to keep going, even up to this minute. It was just, money meant ability to do more. And that's what it is. So money was never really a motive, even though there's been a lot of it coming and going. Willie Nelson's a pretty good friend of mine. I was talking to Willie about, because I was out on the road with him a lot. And Willie and I would sit down. We knew each other well. I said, "Willie, man, I don't know how much, I appreciate these dates that I'm doing with you, but no matter how much money I make, it's never enough." He said, "Larry, maybe it was really not ever your money." Right? Yeah, you're right. It was never really my money, was it? I'd gotten things going. After the Black Oak show, I was able to book Blue Oyster Cult and Foghat and some other stuff. I was getting a slow rotation going. I lived in a cheap apartment over here in Tulsa. And those shows were making money each time. So in 1975, this same agent in New York, Bill Elson, that sold me Black Oak, said, "Larry, I owe you one." He said, "You ever heard of Peter Frampton?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Within a few months, he's going to be the biggest act and have the biggest album called Frampton Comes Alive. Why don't you, can you find us a place to play in Tulsa that'll hold a crowd of maybe 20,000 people?" Yeah. Out of the old stock car track on the fairgrounds. That's where the horse race track is now. So I held the date, and in the meantime, Cain's Ballroom became available to buy. And I went down to my realtor and I put down the earnest money, signed the purchase agreement, and the closing, I put $3,000 down earnest. I paid $60,000 for Cain's, okay? Paid too much probably, right? But there was an appointed time I had to come up with the other $57,000 to close the deal. This is all going on simultaneously with the Peter Frampton. The Frampton show, I believe, was in June of '76. No. Yes, I think. I barely have enough money to do the Frampton shows. Peter Frampton, Santana, Gary Wright, and another act, Natural Gas, I think her name, I think. So I just happened to sell 32,000 tickets for that show, and I had a big chunk of money. just in time to run over and close the deal on Cain's. It was such a close deal. So that's how I ended up buying Cain's. But so that's how I got it. And when I got it, I didn't know what to do with it. I remember being in it, and instead of a sterile office, I wanted to be down there. My office is where the boys' office now, the Rogers. So that's where I ended up. And once again, I'm calling all the agents, New York, LA, Nashville, who hadn't heard of Cain's Ballroom. In fact, there weren't many shows coming through Tulsa until I started doing that. But once I got it started, the shows were coming at me pretty good. Because the bands that love Cain's, Cain was a worn out old building then. And I never had the money to do a lot with it. And I didn't know how long I was going to own it. Because I always wanted to transition into the arena stuff. And, in that batch of small shows I did, that really didn't have an awareness here, where it was Van Halen, Sex Pistols, U2, Bon Jovi, The Police, some really important artists. And I was on my way. We didn't get a lot of attention from the South Side, but I built a loyal following. There were people that would come to all the shows. They'd see Jerry Jeff Walker, David Allen Coe, Sex Pistols. They just came to everything because of what we were doing there. They just figured, well, it's a real show and we got to see it if it's at Cain's. So that stature, that profile built. And I can't recall all the shows I did at Cain's. I know that out in my barn I've got hundreds of pounds of archives and show files. And when I look at them, which is rare, I'll say, shit, I didn't know I did that one. Oh, wow, I didn't know I did that. I'd established what I was doing, and the artist wanted to play at Cain's. And I didn't have money to air condition it. And sometimes, when the Foo Fighters played for me there, Grohl said, it's the hottest date we ever played. So that's the hottest we ever were at a show. So you take it both ways.
Right.
In reference to the Sex Pistols, what came out of it, when I did the date, when I brought them in, they were just an interesting band to pick up, because I'd heard all the rumors about them and a little bit of the history in London. So it's right up my alley, And I didn't think there was a possibility of me getting a date in Tulsa. I figured when Malcolm McLaren, their manager, brought them over, they're going to play New York, they're going to play LA, they're going to play Chicago. But Malcolm, a pretty smart guy, decided to go south in dangerous territory and get trouble that we get in the paper. Bad publicity is big publicity. And when they got out of 7 dates, Cain's was number 6. And when they got here, I go to the Cain's I go in about 8:30 in the morning, generally. Well, so the bus was already on the park there by my front door. I said, yeah, that's unusual. Bands show up at 2 o'clock, unload, do a sound check, come back and do the show. So as I'm unlocking the door at the Cain's to step in, the bus just starts unloading. So all of a sudden I got 22 people, including Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious, Steve. So I've got them under my feet all day. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Did not know it. Like most of my shows, I didn't see anything. I never thought we were making any kind of history. I was just grabbing what I could grab. Being a guitar player, I had a little bit of an edge, I think, over just a regular club owner. I'm terrible. I was a terrible businessman. In fact, I still am. I'm still playing with that guitar playing beside of my brain. So what came out of that is I had about 800 people, 850 show up night a show. It was bad weather, snow, ice. Across the street were the contingencies of young Christian organizations with their banners. And there was an occasional snowball fight between the Pistols and the guys across the street, But it was all in good fun. And what I realized about the Pistols were they were just a bunch of young kids. Just a bunch of young kids. There was nothing evil about them. But when they got on stage and started off with God Save the Queen, I got that old chill up my back of my neck again. I loved them. And the show's over, and I don't know what country band we had the next night. We're mopping the floor and pushing kegs, just like always. But it's turned out to be so significant. But once again, I had a contingency of people that believed in everything we were doing at Cain's. And they might have been Merle Haggard fans. But they're there. There was no punk scene. You got to keep in mind, there was no punk scene. And there were a lot of young musicians that came out to see them, though, that were in the know. And I would say the day after that show, they were sitting around a cafeteria table, just like I was, saying, we got to make a punk band. That's what came out of it. And of course, that started kind of a whirlwind, I believe. I think a lot of stuff I don't like giving myself credit where it's not due, but I think those days in my presence at Cain's have a lot to do with how big the music scene is here. I really do. Because all of a sudden I started a draft of talent through here. And of course, a bunch of them became superstars. So all of a sudden I get a Van Halen date. Opening for Montrose, Ronnie Montrose. I paid Van Halen, I think, $1,500. I paid Bon Jovi $500. I paid the Sex Pistols $500. They went broke on the road. I had to cough them up another $500. Which I did. I said, but here's the deal. I've printed my advance tickets are printed at $2.50. I'll have to raise the ticket price at midstream. So the authentic tickets, which there's one here, is where I marked through them and changed it to $3.50 in my own hand. The Police, I played at Cain's, Roxanne, and just hit #1. The timing was perfect. The band loved the building. Sting still talks about Cain's Ballroom. I've shipped him Cain's Ballroom shirts twice when I was at Cain's over to London. So he was a Cain's fanatic. I played them. I paid them $3,000. They sold out. And by that time, it was real important for me to see where I was heading. Not to stop at Cain's, but as the big groups went into superstardom, I was able to pick up the date because I'd been loyal on the showcase. So it really had a future, okay? So I think a year and a half later, Van Halen tours to play the arenas. The Police, and they was $50,000 a gig. That was big money. I offered them $50 to play Lloyd Noble Arena down in Norman, and I offered them $50 here to play the Tulsa Assembly Center. They took the date down at Lloyd Noble. Instead of playing the $50,000 date, Sting wanted to play Cain's again for $3,000. That's how much he liked Cain's. The music and musical taste are always on the move. Nothing stays the same. In fact, you almost have to I always had to reinvent myself every 6 months. But to graduate from Elvin Bishop, Muddy Waters, which I did, into the stuff that was larger profile, national, that's what the 80s represented to me. I was getting bigger bands. I was getting a bigger crossover with Metallica, with Megadeth. There was one show I had confirmed, Guns N' Roses at Cain's, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Megadeth.
Oh my God.
And Axl probably, Guns N' Roses peeled off probably because of Axl Rose's antics, I'm not sure. But we still had Metallica and Megadeth on the same stage. When I got started in '71, Leon had just moved back, or was getting ready to move back to Tulsa. So that Leon Russell clique, I heard about all the time. Oh, well, I've been over at Leon's studio. I've been over to his house. Well, I never was, because I was just a tractor boy from Keystone, Manford. But I thought to myself, I said, boy, if I could ever penetrate that shell, I'd just like to do Leon Russell. That'd just be my full time. No other artist. And that never really happened, but I know that I brought Leon in over the years more than anybody else has in the state. He was hard to know, very, very much introverted. But once he didn't like to talk about music business, but you could talk to him about opening a used car lot and he'd perk up. He still had that Tulsa hillbilly that, yeah, used car on 11th Street, yeah, well, that I liked about him. And there was one point in maybe 10 years ago that I spoke with him by phone about managing him. And that's what we were talking about. And I stopped him mid-sentence. I said, now, Leon, you've never said, I booked you a lot of shows, but you never said anything more than hello to me. And he said, oh, Larry, my social skills are really awful. My social skills are awful. But Leon did come, toward the end, Leon came out of that. And he would hang after a show and sign autographs. I never saw that in him. But he'd been around, you know, artists in the 50s and 60s, especially the black artists, they would get stiffed all the time. Promoters wouldn't pay them after the gig. And Leon had that ingrained, which is I guess that's the reason you had, as close as I was to Leon, when he got ready to load it, I put him on a lot of Willie Nelson dates as support all over the U.S. And after talking to him on the phone about being his manager, he wouldn't get off the bus till I paid him the $3,000 bonus, rest of money due for his performance. He still had that in the back of his head. So here's your $3,000, my friend. So yeah, I love working with Leon. He was the real thing. So important, so bright. In the last 12 years or so, after I stepped away from Cain's, I hooked up with Willie and started doing dates across the country. And because of that association, I picked up George Jones and B.B. King and Merle Haggard and then Gordon Lightfoot. So once again, I had more than I could do. And I thought it was done. When I left Cain's, I was done with the music business, and it was done with me, I figured. So I just, I was in limbo for a few months and thought, man, I'm over. I had to go through bankruptcy. I thought I was done, and I wasn't. So after I hooked back up, within months, I was right back on top. I mean, I went from 0 to 100, thank goodness. That's just kind of like the music business is. It's feast or famine. I've had a rewarding life. I know I've got to go places most people never go. It seems to be more important to people from the outside looking in. To me, it was just all in a day's work. I just happened to, I was in a business where they played guitars, you know. What I've seen happen at Cain's in the last 20 years has been all good. I didn't know the Rogers guys. I didn't know the Rogers family. I'm very close with them now, of course. I was with Doc, who was my spine surgeon too. So I'm very close to them and I support them so much. But they were able to do with Cain's what I would never have been able to do, because they have put lots of money into the place and it paid off. When I saw them last month, I said, guys, since Cain's was born, when it was born as the Louvre Ballroom, it never looked this grand, not since it was fresh and new, as it does now. So I think they've done a wonderful job, and I still love the place, and I've got my name written on the wall somewhere back in the power room. It's the fact that Cain's Ballroom is getting all the attention that it's deserved. I will risk saying that it's the most revered building in the state of Oklahoma. I'm talking about any building. It's the sentimental journey because of the music and the dancing and occasional fist fights, and the girls you pick up may turn in to be your wives at some time, and you're divorced maybe because you went to Cain's and your wife caught you, okay? So it's affected so many people. It's just for the working, Bob Wills designed, Bob Will's target was the working class people. That's who he played to. That's who he wanted to come to shows, to Cain's. That's who he saw. And those working class people, the biggest event each month or each weekend would be to go to Cain's Ballroom. That was it. That's where they chose to go, and they got such great music off that stage with Bob and the Texas Playboys. It all happened right here. And I think because of Bob Will's presence in this town, this part of the country, a lot of moms and dads encouraged their kids to learn how to play guitar and fiddle. Or maybe that wasn't going on anywhere else. But to me, it's all bled down to what's happening here. You know, what's happening over at the Mercury Lounge. Unbelievable talent pool coming in there. I love it. Will I go promote them? No, but I still appreciate seeing young people make it. And yeah, it's vibrant here in the year 2024. It's hard to put a chill up my back, by the way. It ain't easy. But that's how I got there. But it was extremely important for me when I was at Cain's to see how far I could push it. And I pushed it as far as I could for 24 years and some months. So I played my part. The Rogers family won't be the last people down in Cain's. I told Jim Rogers that. I said, Jim, you're just the caretaker. I was the caretaker. There'll be more caretakers. We got to make sure they're good ones. Cain's is a national treasure. Okay, I think Cain has been the magnet that's caused the gentrification of downtown. I think Cain's was the starting point. I'll give it that credit. My days at Cain's, we were outlaws up on the hill. You know, I held court there. That's my clubhouse, and I held court. But to see it grow like that's pretty magnificent. I remember when nightfall came to downtown on most nights of the week, about the only light on was that Cain's light on top of my roof at Cain's. There was no life really at the downtown areas, but that's all changed. So how Cain's has affected the economy, $1 billion, $2 billion, how much is it? When the hotels fill up and the pizzas run out because they sold them out, Cain started that. It's 100 years old. What else in Tulsa is 100 years old and still in business? They talk about the ghost of Cain's Ballroom, right? I really think I'm it. I'm the ghost. I'm the ghost that keeps lurking. But I've gone through there when there was no one in the building except the Rogers boys, and I've had tears come down my cheeks of my face. It's just because wow. I spent half of my life here, and the people that had come and gone through here, whether they were musicians or the people that worked for me, sometimes for nothing, it's just it's like flashback. So I'm still connected to Cain's. I'll always be. Maybe from a distance, and I'll always be connected. Love it.